Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. And we are starting now the program of our second session. The panel of this morning is devoted to cognitive, neurobiological, and endogenous processes. We have 3 speakers today, and then we should leave some space for, leave some floor to comments and suggestions and questions. Then I would like to call here the first of a speaker is Slawomir Sztajer, sorry for my bad Polish pronunciation, from Adam Mickiewicz University, Poznań, Poland. The title of his paper is Symbolic, Efficacy, Reconsidered, a Cognitive Approach to Spiritual Healing. I leave the floor to Slawomir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we can say that spiritual healing plays a considerable role in religious and spiritual traditions around the world. This phenomenon has been documented in many cultures and eras, while a variety of accounts of spiritual healing have been provided by ethnologists studying indigenous cultures. The phenomenon is also well known in contemporary developed societies. For example, Christianity, which has always been interested in healing, still shows great interest in the narratives and practices of spiritual healing. In the 20th century, the phenomenon became of interest not only to anthropologists and psychologists, but also to physiologists, neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, and of course, scholars of religion. Scholars disagree on how spiritual healing should be understood. For example, according to Fraser Watts, spiritual healing can mean at least 3 different things. First, healing in which spiritual practices play a role. Second, healing in which spiritual aspects of the human person are presumed to be involved. And last, meaning healing that is explained in terms of what are presumed to be spiritual process. According to the first account, healing in which spiritual practices play a role, healing is explained entirely in terms of the impact of spiritual practices, such as prayer or meditation, on psychosomatic processes. This understanding doesn't invoke any spiritual explanation, that is, an explanation assuming some spiritual ontology, for example, the existence of spiritual forces. The second account of spiritual healing is based on the distinction between the psychological and the spiritual, between soul and spirit. Spiritual healing targets the second, rather discussed in the psychotherapeutic discourse dimension of human being. This approach is usually holistic because it doesn't separate spirit from body, spirit from mind. It doesn't postulate the existence of transcendent spiritual reality and can be expressed in purely anthropological terms. Finally, the third approach represents spiritual healing as a process involving transcendent resources, whether they be supernatural beings, supernatural powers, energies. In this case, people engage in spiritual healing see themselves as channels of healing energy that transcend themselves. This understanding predominates in religious communities and spiritual groups. For example, Christians see God as an ultimate healer, but also it is present also in non-religious spiritual movement. What is striking at first sight in Watts' division is the tension between the scientific and non-scientific, theological, religious approaches to spiritual healing. While the first 2 approaches fell within the scientific discourse, the third refers to non-empirical phenomena that defy scientific explanation. Watts proposes to treat the scientific, ontological, spiritual approaches complementary. This attitude is quite popular in literature on spiritual healing today. But my ambition here is more modest. Yeah, I'm not interested in theological questions and will limit myself to the scientific study of spiritual healing. Although we need to distinguish between religious and scientific approaches to healing analytically, demonstrating, for example, that there are differences in understanding ailment and healing in medical and religious discourses, it would be inappropriate to explain particular cases of religious healing solely in terms of modern medicine, without taking into consideration the cultural context in which healing occurs. As Erika Bourguignon argues, such isolation of the religious from the empirical would be nonsensical, because the process of religious and spiritual healing cannot be fully grasped if we don't understand the cultural context of illness, diagnosis, therapy, etc. Not all symptoms, illnesses, and cases of recovery recognized by participants would be defined as symptoms, illnesses, and cases of recovery by modern medical practice. Moreover, in the healing process, the illness symptoms don't have to disappear for the illness to be considered cured. The change of meaning is often more important than the disappearance of symptoms, but the meaning is produced in a cultural context, and thus this context may be taken into consideration. In modern medical discourse, the notion of spiritual healing doesn't play a significant role and is usually replaced by the idea of the placebo effect. The placebo effect, of course, refers to the phenomenon in which patient experience a therapeutic benefit from a treatment that has no therapeutic activity, simply because they believe in it to be effective. This can occur when a patient receives a placebo and subsequently feels better, perceives a reduction in symptoms, or even experiences measurable improvements in health. Not due to inherent properties of the placebo, but because of their beliefs and expectations about their treatment. Now I refer to the key term I use in my presentation, the term symbolic efficacy. That comes from Structural Anthropology by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Lévi-Strauss, who studied the psychophysiological effects of ritual and ritual symbols on participants. 2 chapters of this book, The Sorcerer and His Magic and the Effectiveness of Symbols, are dedicated to the role of symbols, mythic narratives, and magic rituals in healing. Intuitions that underlie the concept of symbolic efficacy have been further developed by representatives of interpretive anthropology. For example, Clifford Geertz argued that symbols can be understood both as models of and models for reality. The term model refers to the fact that symbolic systems can model relations among entities and processes, and in physical, social, organic, and psychological systems. What is essential, however, is that modeling means not only reflecting, representing, imitating, but also stimulating, designing, and planning. In other words, symbols can be models of as well as models for non-symbolic objects and processes. The second type of modeling presupposes symbolic efficiency, the manipulation of non-symbolic systems so that they conform to symbolic systems. Victor Turner's theory of ritual also takes into account the phenomenon of symbolic efficacy. He studied symbolic efficacy in ritual and in a broader social context, showing that ritual symbols are used to transform ritual participants. This transformation usually has long-term social consequences, especially if the ritual changes the social status of a participant. Ritual transformation, which takes place especially in the liminal phase of the ritual, involves symbols. And as with other conceptions of symbolic efficacy, those symbols don't just represent ritual reality, but bring about psychological and social change. Apart from different ways of understanding the concept of symbolic efficacy, scholars have proposed many explanatory approaches, including the cognitive account. It must be emphasized that the cognitive dimension of ritual healing is only one of many dimensions of the healing process, which can only be analytically disentangled from the complex system of interdependencies. Intra-individual cognitive processes play a considerable role here, but they are permanently embedded in physical, social, and cultural settings. Scholars studying healing rituals observe, for example, that these rituals, especially those involving trance and possession, occur in specific socio-cultural context and in historical or structural opposition to other forms of ritual experience. Healing rituals involving possession are more common in complex societies with levels of political administration above that of the local community, high population density, and also multi-level status distinctions. Moreover, cognitive processes are sometimes defined in a broader way as processes that involve objects and systems outside the organism. According to the extended cognition hypothesis, cognitive processes are not encapsulated in the brain, but extended into the external world. Apart from that embodiment of cognition, there can be extended cognitive systems consisting of individual minds, bodies, but also external objects that together perform cognitive functions. Healing rituals could be examples of such a complex cognitive system, because not only many persons, but also many material tools are involved in cognitive processing. The effectiveness of healing is a challenging problem, particularly in the case of spiritual healing. The question of treatment effectiveness depends on the point of view taken. Western medical point of view can substantially differ from that of the participants and has been repeatedly pointed as it has been pointed out in the anthropological literature. If we assume that the therapeutic action targets not so much somatic basis of the illness, but the meaning attached to the patient's illness and patient's self, life, and interpersonal relations, then the effectiveness of treatments appears in a new light. As Bougnon, for example, notes, if alternation of lifestyle and self-concept are seen as positive therapeutic results, the vast number of possession cards around the world must be seen as largely effective, even in the absence of statistical information. The effectiveness, however, is seen here in a different way than in Western medicine, because on the whole, religious healing tends to pursue goals different from those of Western scientific medicine. Cognitive and emotional processes appear to play a crucial role in spiritual healing. The cognitive dimension of healing practices can be studied using various disciplinary perspectives, of which cognitive psychology and cognitive science appear to be the most promising. The latest achievements of the cognitive science of religion could be used to explain at least some aspects of this phenomenon. However, cognitive scholars have not been seriously interested in spiritual healing. The cognitive science of religion is a multidisciplinary approach to religious phenomena, combining research from psychology, evolutionary biology, anthropology, neuroscience, and other disciplines. It aims to explain religious thought and behavior in terms of underlying cognitive and evolutionary processes. Most cognitive scientists understand religious and spiritual cognition as a byproduct of human evolved brain-mind. Religious cognition is not specific because religious thought involves ordinary cognitive processes and mechanisms. For example, cognitive scientists point to such mechanisms as a theory of mind, folk theory of mind, the tendency of dualistic thinking, that is mind-body dualism, the tendency to teleological thinking, or cognitive mechanism regulating social interactions. Both spirituality and religion engage a number of cognitive tools, so-called modules, each of which arose in response to the adaptive problems encountered by our ancestors. Therefore, religious and spiritual experiences are not unique. They didn't evolve for religious or spiritual purposes, but rather were side effects of adaptive features. In anthropology, where the concept of symbolic efficacy was initially coined, cognitively oriented scholars have proposed an approach fundamentally different from that which dominated in symbolic anthropology. Third, the cognitive approach emphasizes explanation more, while symbolic anthropology is mainly, interpretive anthropology is mainly interested in interpretation. Indeed, the interpretation of religious symbols is important even for cognitive scholars, but it cannot replace explanation. It is argued that ritual efficacy, including the efficacy of healing, takes place even if participants don't understand religious symbolism. Some scholars have argued that in its pure form, ritual is meaningless. I refer to well-known thesis of Fritz Stahl, the meaninglessness of ritual. A similar difference can be seen in the study of spiritual healing. Interpretive approaches emphasize the meaning of symbols and symbolic systems, such as myths and religious doctrines, arguing that the transformation of meaning is responsible for the effectiveness of the healing process. Symbols may not have a causal effect on physiological processes underlying disease and underlying health, but they change the understanding of disease and healing. Secondly, interpretive anthropology and many other anthropological approaches emphasize the role of cultural specific context. If we want to know how spiritual healing works, we need to know cultural specific models, concepts, narratives. On the contrary, the cognitive science of religion argues that religious cognition and ritual behavior, even if they contain cultural specific features, are largely informed by knowledge that is not culturally specific and neither needs to be explicitly transmitted. For example, the cognitive study of ritual, especially the components theory proposed by Lawson and Macaulay, can be applied to both religion and spirituality. The key concept in this approach is the superhuman agency, which is represented in the ritual structure by the ritual participants. While only rituals that have some connection or appeal to superhuman agency can be defined as religious rituals, in practice, a significant number of actions labeled as spiritual clearly refer to intentional supernatural or superhuman agents, beings. In most cases, spiritual healing practices would fall under the under what cognitive scholars call religion. The cognitive approach to ritual efficacy is based on the assumption that ritual actions are cognitively represented as actions despite being perceived as unusual and even non-natural. Since the representation of ritual action is based on ordinary cognition, that is to a certain degree culturally non-specific, it is hypothesized that the effectiveness of ritual actions can be understood by participants largely independent of culturally transmitted knowledge. Cognition plays a considerable role in ritual action. The way people conceptualize actions in general constrains their thinking of religious rituals. At the same time, ritual action differs from ordinary instrumental action in that it violates cognitive expectations concerning casuality. Rituals are actions that are performed to accomplish something that would not normally follow from this specific action. In other words, ritual efficacy is about producing non-natural consequences. Participants perceive a ritual as efficacious if they can attribute some supernatural agency to ritual actions. When looked at through the lens of the cognitive theory of ritual, spiritual healing practices can be seen as systems of counterintuitive actions involving specific agents that adhere to particular syntactic rules. These rituals, while they may seem inexplicable in terms of modern medicine, fit well within the cognitive structures that have evolved over time and serve various social, emotional, and psychological functions. Thank you.
Now I'm calling here the second of our speakers this morning, Ewelina Berdowicz. Sorry again for my bad pronunciation of Polish language. The title of a paper is Power Healing, Divine Anointing and Impartation as Key Triggers for the Neo-Pentecostal Trance States. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Today I'm going to refer to my research that I took in Poland and Italy. First of all, I will start with some terms that you need to know to understand the point. These are the terms: Neo-Pentecostalism, power evangelism, divine anointing, impartation, and power healing. Neo-Pentecostalism. This is the third phase of the Pentecostal charismatic movement that came into existence in the 1980s and has considerably shaped the present-day Christianity ever since. It is also referred to as the third wave of the Holy Spirit. John Wimber and Charles Peter Wagner were responsible for its rapid development and spread across the US and the rest of the world. Nowadays, elements of the Neo-Pentecostal ritual can be observed in those characteristics of mainline churches, as in the case of the Roman Catholic Church. Power evangelism, an approach promoted by John Wimber within the Neo-Pentecostal communities. It relies on proclaiming and demonstrating the gospel in an efficient way. The former applies to itinerant preaching, mostly about signs and wonders in contemporary Christianity, which aims to urge individuals to follow the idea of divine empowerment. The latter, on the other hand, stands for the Neo-Pentecostal leaders' attempts to evoke what is believed to be supernatural phenomena and to ensure the divine nature. The whole procedure often results in putting members of the audience into a trance state, which in turn tends to be interpreted as the so-called resting in the spirit. Divine anointing, a term frequently used by contemporary Neo-Pentecostals to relate to penetration and domination of a given person by the Holy Spirit. It is understood as deep empowerment that gives individuals the authority of heaven to heal others, to run ministries, and to build strong networks of power evangelism enthusiasts. Impartation. The act of passing the divine anointing onto others. It is defined as a spiritual transfer that takes place when touching another person. Performing impartation is often accompanied by various manifestations that occur among people in response to what is considered God's power. They include symptoms typical of trance states, namely falling over, shaking, sobbing, laughing, screaming, making animal sounds, crawling on the floor, and losing control of the body. Power healing, also known as divine healing, the term stands for a profound belief that an individual who struggles with life hardships caused by different factors can experience a direct intervention from heaven so that he or she no longer suffers. Wimber enumerated 5 crucial areas that divine healing can come in. These are healing of the spirit, healing of the effects of past hurts, healing of the demonized and mental illnesses, healing of the body, healing of the dying and the dead. Now, the next slide will relate to the trigger I mentioned before. And this is the video I would like to present so that you know what I'm talking about. So let's start.
Most impartation that you've ever believed for right now, you're going to impart to each other. So you're going to take it, you're going to put it on somebody else's head and watch, and then say, more, Lord. Whoa! More, Lord. Everybody, place that anointing, that crown, that gift upon someone else's head. Keep praying. Every single one of you, impartation, legacy, 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 legacy. Increase your glory. More, Lord. Try it again, try it again, try it again, try it again. More, Lord. Fire. There's fire. Place it on their heads. Find somebody. I think he's got it. Shake up, Baba. Fire. Place it on another one's head. Fire. Legacy. Legacy. The greatest thing you've ever seen in your life. Prophesy over them 10 times. Start to prophesy over it 10 times. What I've seen, let it be. 10 times what I've seen, let it be. 10 times what I've seen, let it be. Believe for it 10 times. How much legacy do you want? 10 times. 10 times. 10 times. More, Lord. More, Lord. More, Lord. 10 times. You will rebuild. You will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will restore the places long devastated. You will renew the ruined cities and the devastated for generations. I'm telling you, try it again. Some of you give up too easily. Try it again. Find somebody. Put a crown on their head. Whatever anointing you have in your life. Whatever anointing you have on your life. You just put it on the next person. And you say 10 times. 10 times. 10 times. 10 times. 10 times. 10 times.
Now I will refer directly to my field research. The research was taken between 2019 and 2023. It was taken in Poland and Italy. And the reason for taking that research was to explore how the Neo-Pentecostal language, understood as a tool, contributes to one inner healing, especially when embedded into a set of customized verbal strategies and used as a catalyst for the act of impartation. The groups I investigated are the following. Sabbath Church Roma, between April 2022 and July 2022. Comunità Cattolica Shalom, April 2022, July 2022. Hillsong Rome, April 2022, July 2022. Philadelphia Church in Poland, that's from October 2019 until June 2023. Vineyard Christian Center Poland, October 2019 and June 2023. Research methods: participant observation, analysis of the audiovisual materials, individual interviews, and surveys. The stages of the research were as following. Stage 1, precise definition of the Neo-Pentecostal language. So I was looking for the definition. I was trying to provide a definition. Stage number 2, persuasive devices in the Neo-Pentecostal language. So I was focusing on them as well. Stage 3, I concentrated on verbal strategies rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy and those that were adapted by Neo-Pentecostals. Stage 4, I focused on empowerment-oriented vocabulary for inducing the act of impartation. And the last stage, those were the interviews and surveys with those who claim to have experienced inner healing. The keywords that are necessary, that were actually necessary for this research: the Neo-Pentecostal language, Neo-Pentecostal leaders, Neo-Pentecostals, Pentecostal Catholics, Neo-Pentecostal awakening and transformation process, verbal intervention strategies, automatic negative thoughts and maladaptive behavior, spiritual encounter, inner restructure, inner healing, spiritual rebirth, the distressed, and the awakened, the transformed. Thank you. Okay. The main thesis I formulated for the purposes of this research was: the Neo-Pentecostal language, whose persuasive potential makes it a powerful tool, serves as a trigger, modulator, and mediator of one's spiritual rebirth that can be experienced as a result of a 3-step process involving the preparation, immersion, and reinforcement stages, during which an individual's cognition and self-perception undergo a considerable change. The Neo-Pentecostal language tends to be embedded into a set of customized verbal strategies, including evidence gathering, consequential analysis, cognitive bias identification, generating alternatives, problem solving, reattribution, imaginal exposure, decatastrophizing, and positivity reorientation that constitute the basis of the cognitive behavioral therapeutic model, also known as cognitive restructuring. And that can also be recognized in the Neo-Pentecostal ritual. Generative, protective, breaking, and destructive speech acts are one of the most distinctive attributes of the Neo-Pentecostal language due to their causative and cathartic effects. Their perlocutionary force focuses primarily on modifying the mental and material reality. The Neo-Pentecostal social sphere is divided into zones where group solidarity that rests on shared symbols is gradually built. The zones, namely the relationship zone, the worship zone, and the cooperation zone, correspond to the phases of the Neo-Pentecostal awakening and transformation process, respectively. Definition of the Neo-Pentecostal language, that's a definition I formulated during my research, actually as a result of my research. The Neo-Pentecostal language rests on the vernacular and therefore its users understand one another. Hence, it can be interpreted as its variety, characteristic of a particular group of individuals, in this case, those fully involved in power evangelism, including Neo-Pentecostals and members of the so-called mainline churches. Due to the environment, it tends to be spoken within. The Neo-Pentecostal language reveals itself as a form of a religious language whose origin can be traced back to the 1980s, that is, the period of Wimber's heyday. This unique code, whose exceptionality concerns mostly its pragmatic aspect, has been updated and adjusted to the contemporary religious marketplace over the course of the years. The Neo-Pentecostal language has both catalytic and cathartic potential, which can be observed during the immersion stage of the awakening and transformation process. It can therefore be acknowledged that the Neo-Pentecostal language affects those who claim to be distressed, and it happens mainly in combination with a tailored religious content, aiming to reduce emotional pain that is presented to the audience within a specific environment, characteristic of its frequent allusions to the supernatural, whose attributes are believed to turn the harsh reality for the better. Importantly, the exposure has to be direct, intense, and recurring. The Neo-Pentecostal language edifies, stimulates, strengthens one's convictions, enhances relationships, and empowers. This is exactly how it evokes one's awakening. The Neo-Pentecostal language needs a skilled and recognizable transmitter to work through, such as some prominent religious figures, often referred to as religious leaders. The Neo-Pentecostal awakening and transformation process, these are the stages I mentioned, the preparation stage. The term stands for the pre-service interaction between participants that mostly occurs in a church cafe or in the hall. Members of the audience establish a relationship between one another, small talks. Community members testify to newcomers, and frequent references are made to the symbols a given community rests on. The second stage I noticed, the immersion stage, it takes place during the worship service. This is when individuals experience spiritual awakening. Leaders implement a set of verbal interventions focused on inner restructure. The main objective is to make the participants change their cognition and perception. Verbal strategies are rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, but adapted by Neo-Pentecostals. When used within the Neo-Pentecostal context, they strongly rely on persuasive devices characteristic of the Neo-Pentecostal language. And the last stage, the reinforcement stage, the term represents the post-service interaction between community members, which includes, for example, regular house meetings, common projects, and outdoor activities such as street evangelization. This is when individuals experience the actual transformation, the inner healing. Key components of the Neo-Pentecostal awakening ritual are as follows: the leader, the distressed, the tool, ritual acts, visible symptoms such as trance states, shaking, falling over, laughing, sobbing, making animal sounds, etc. The immersion stage, this is how it works. The leader starts her performance. Leader presents the main topic, for example, the suffering. Leader employs verbal interventions. Then the leader incorporates persuasive devices. Leader enhances group solidarity by referring to shared symbols. Leader introduces the audience to the nature and benefits of divine anointing. Then the audience accepts his or her point of view. Leader induces the act of impartation. Participants fall into a trance state. And then spiritual awakening takes place. Mental and material reality changes. Okay, this is a kind of summary, the process actually. So first of all, the distress with maladaptive thinking and behavior, verbal interventions based on persuasive devices, typical of the Neo-Pentecostal language, the act of impartation catalyzed by the empowerment-oriented vocabulary, trance states, and the awakened with a change in cognition and perception, the inner healing. Persuasive devices of the Neo-Pentecostal language, strong reliance on and the use of imperative sentences, conditional sentences, modal verbs, imagery like metaphors, personification, assertions, loaded words and phrases, inclusiveness, hyperboles, anecdotal evidence, repetition, rhetorical questions, cause and effect arguments, connotations, humor, rising and falling intonation, compliments and exaggerated tributes, expert opinion, triplets, declarative statements, and mitigation. What do the transformed say? These are actually the quotations, because I made a survey among Italians and Poles, and these are some of the answers. I had a terrible family situation. It's a long story, but my mother prostituted herself, and me and my brother testify that. I had a reason of depression, lost the meaning of life. That was female, age range 18-30. Before knowing God and his son Jesus, nothing gave me true satisfaction, nothing gave me true peace or lasting joy. It always felt like I had to constantly renew the source of these things. I was struggling with purpose and meaning. No matter how much I tried to find these things, I never seemed to grasp them. Female, age range 31-45. Before the divine encounter, I had a busy and eventful life, but it didn't give me enough satisfaction. I was struggling with a sense of emotional discomfort. It was a real burden which I couldn't get rid of, and which was a consequence of some negative experiences as well as bad decisions that I had made in the past. Those events made me angry and disappointed. Male, age range 18-30. Divine anointing, that was the second category I formulated. I felt incredibly weird because I worshipped God down on my knees, falling on the floor, crying, and this was beautiful but new for me. I felt his presence like a warm hand on my shoulder, whispering me I could go on with his power and love. And again, female, age range 18-30. I felt like a heavy burden had been lifted on my shoulders. I also felt a strong power over me, something greater than anything I had previously experienced. Female, age range 31-45. During the worship service in my church, I realized that God is capable of removing all my burdens and make me feel emotionally and physically lighter, liberated. At the time when I asked God directly and in a simple manner to untie the knot of all the negative emotions which caused a growing discomfort, I could feel some kind of power falling onto my whole body. After a little while, I realized that my mind and heart were free and light. Male, age range 18-30. And the third category I formulated life after the transformation. I'm a healthy person. I love serving God, translating from one language to another in church, helping up as much as I can. I took a degree. I've realized myself. I love myself and people around me. I do not consider being Christian as a religion because God isn't a religion. Sure, we should follow his plan for us, but sometimes we can lose ourselves and after a while be found again. My life is completely changed because now I know my value. I know that I'm a child of God. I'm even more patient than before. Female, age range 18-30. I sometimes struggle with the worldly thoughts and unrighteous thoughts, but the word of God always comes to me. It restores a sound mind in me. I am in a good physical health to the glory of God. I have no illness or pain or physical impediments. I have been transformed into a new person. I have received grace to be kind, to be patient and unselfish. In my old life, I never succeeded in becoming these things. Female, age range 31-45. And the last one, I would say that my mental condition is much better now. I feel free. Yes, the word free is the right word. My life has changed completely since the encounter. I don't mean the number of problems. What I have in mind is the way I deal with them. I have been profoundly transformed by God. I face all my difficulties together with Him. Of course, life without challenges is not possible, but facing them with God enables us to look at all the hardships from a different perspective. Male, age range 18-30. The summary. Divine anointing is believed to be the touch of God. It can be passed on to others in the act of impartation, practiced on a regular basis among Neo-Pentecostals and other communities following the ideas of power evangelism. In order for impartation to happen, appropriate ground needs to be prepared as well as catalysts employed. The Neo-Pentecostal language, when embedded into a set of tailored verbal strategies, supported by empowerment-oriented vocabulary, serves as such a catalyst. As a result, an individual falls into a trance state that can be recognized based on visible symptoms. In consequence, an individual who claimed to have been distressed announces his or her awakening, which later turns into long-term inner restructure, that is transformation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ewelina. Now we have the third and last of our speaker is Mika Turkia, who is presenting online, is presenting a paper called Healing States, Psychedelics and Society. Mika is an independent scholar. I leave the floor to Mika. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and welcome.
Yeah.
I'll start the screen sharing. Okay, so I suppose you can see it now. And so,
Mika,
this is
sorry,
what,
could you
can
speak
you hear me?
a little bit louder?
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so this presentation is about psychedelic therapies, and I have studied it for approximately 6 years. And it's downloadable here. There are some references. So this website, psychedelictherapy.fi, and this Sapienza 2023 video. And
We can't properly hear you. Sorry, Mika. A little bit louder.
okay. Okay. So let me maybe start from the end. There was a question. What kind of symptoms, conditions, or unease lead people to experiment with these healing practices? How are these therapeutic processes integrated with other therapeutic practices? So I have made case studies that answer to these questions. For example, here is one on psychosis and bipolar disorder. And the point here is that psychosis is usually an exclusion criteria to therapies, or especially psychedelic therapies. And this presents a case where psychosis due to trauma and partly due to cannabis use was resolved. And the other one is also quite rare. And this was a woman who was psychotic for decades. And she got a lot better with ayahuasca. And then depression, treatment-resistant depression. With psilocybin mostly. These are 2 experiments of self-treatment and then one with guided group sessions. And then this is also one example. And then with MDMA, LSD, and this kind of currently less known therapy method. And this is about anxiety, and this is mostly about alcoholism, which was also caused by domestic violence in childhood. So basically, usually all these conditions are caused by trauma, mostly in childhood. And the idea is that you kind of revisit the traumatic events and then resolve them in a different way than as they originally happened. And then there is one more. This is a little bit different. This is more related to anthropology. And it is a description of so-called spiritual attacks in ayahuasca ceremonies. And this mostly handles what is real. How do you know that what you experience is real? And basically, you can't know it. And then there are some additional considerations. For example, that these ceremony facilitators are usually also from a very difficult backgrounds. For example, women who have been sexually abused, and it's very difficult to fully resolve all of this. So sometimes their residual trauma interrupts or interferes with this their work. And the 3 points are not really in the paper, but just from my other drafts. That these ceremony contexts kind of self-regulate quite well, in my opinion. And usually they actually function better than the psychiatric healthcare system. And sometimes there have been attempts to kind of add regulation, for example, interview people very carefully before the ceremonies and so on. They don't seem to work very well. Usually they actually are indicate that the person who is leading the ceremonies is not fully confident or competent. So they are trying to kind of avoid problems that they cannot handle. But in theory, the ceremony facilitators should have confidence to handle all kinds of situations. And then there is one case about psychodynamic psychotherapy, a very old case, which kind of contrasts with these ceremonies and psychedelic therapies. And kind of indicates that usually this conventional treatment system does not function very well, but this is ignored. And then because these other methods are rather unknown or unfamiliar, they appear very risky, but it's often the other way around. So let's go back. So in the abstract, I wrote that the primary mechanism of action appears to be to bring dissociated traumatic events back to consciousness, and then the environment should be safe so that you can safely kind of revisit the trauma and without it being overwhelming again. And these states, these psychedelic states, are similar to trance states. I was considering the differences, how to define trance or psychedelic state and psychosis and the similar states. But I think it's difficult and maybe not so useful to try to define them very clearly. And then there is this 5-MeO-DMT, which is a different kind of psychedelic, which is seems to target like the lower level of the brain, this kind of instinctual layer. So if we would define or divide the brain into three logical parts, the neocortex, and then this emotional layer, and then this reflexive layer. Usually, classical psychedelics would address the upper layers, neocortex, and the emotional layer. But then this 5-MeO-DMT appears to target the lowest layer, and severe trauma is usually on this lowest layer. And then the interesting thing is that it's kind of non-conceptual. For example, in psychology, this object relations paradigm, there is you are the subject, and then there is an object. Let's say the mother, for example. You have a relationship between yourself and the mother, so it's an object relationship. But in this lower level, these distinctions are not so clear, or they are like partly or fully non-existent in a way. And also there's like no continuous time, and maybe causality is also lacking. So it's more like apparently random events without order or clear causality that are related to these survival reflexes like fight, flight, and freeze. And freeze is quite maybe the most important of this. And I think this lowest level is not currently well known in psychiatry. And so this kind of deep trauma cannot be healed very well. And also the classical psychedelics kind of address the layer sometimes, but not consistently. And And one can also be treatment resistant to classical psychedelics in a way. So this appears interesting. It's more effective and faster, and also from a cost point of view, it will be much cheaper to organize this kind of treatment. And this non-conceptualism it's a bit complicated because we cannot really, it's kind of against science. It's kind of, because science is based on concepts. So you define something and then you define relationships between the concepts. But here, if you don't have kind of concepts, then it's kind of outside science. But since many issues reside on this lower level, that is unconceptual, it would be necessary to kind of visit this layer. We cannot stay there, but we can visit. And then, because usually if there is some problem that you cannot solve, you have to spend a lot of effort on defining it and thinking about it. But if you could solve it on this lower layer, you wouldn't need to work with concepts. So this is, I think, quite interesting perspective. This is kind of also different from this shamanic model, which is about spirits or entities. So this layer would appear to be mostly about energy. This kind of energy that is all over, everywhere, and so there is this one professor of religious studies, Martin W. Ball, who has been defining it like this. So it's quite funny because he basically says that you cannot define it and you cannot teach it. You just can experience it. But even if you experience it, you kind of tend to forget it and kind of fades. And then, yeah. Okay, and here is some history. So this is from the US. There is not much history of this practice. It appears to be relatively new. And I have selected people who have practical personal experience. There is also some academic research, but it's because I'm more into ethnography, I find it more interesting to follow the people who actually have experience rather than who do some clinical trials. And there have been a lot of controversies about possible abuse. And they have described in these sources, but I think this Paul is quite, his writings are quite important. And I have some details, but I cannot go into them here. Okay, and the way how this method works is it kind of opens the body. So the theory is that traumatic events are stored as tensions, muscle tensions, basically. And this is also related to the method of somatic experiencing, which is not pharmaceutical method. And the idea is that you complete the trauma responses, that in a traumatic event, you, for example, you try to run away, but you freeze. So when you revisit an event, then you can get over the freeze response and complete the running away reflex. So then you feel that, okay, I ran away, I kind of survived, instead of freezing this feeling that I'm frozen in this traumatic setting and I cannot escape. And this is one way that is...
Mika, sorry to interrupt you. There are 3 minutes left.
Oh, 3 minutes, okay. So you can basically read this paper for more details. Let's see. So basically the goal is to induce relaxation and remove these tensions. And this method seems super effective and more effective than others. About the society, I think these kind of methods are revolutionary, but they should be applied on a large scale. And it seems quite challenging, even though psychedelic therapies are kind of coming. They would need to be adopted faster. Okay, and here is something about the validity of information and this idea of zero-point field, which is related to this experience of energy in the 5-DMT experience. So so this is also includes the idea that there is consciousness is kind of outside the body, outside the brain, and the brain kind of accesses the consciousness that would reside in this zero-point field. So information would be encoded in this field as kind of standing waves in the vacuum, and then that would explain, for example, why we could experience some events from the past or that are not about you. For example, this kind of shamanic trance states where you can sometimes like reside in someone else's body, for example. So that would be one explanation. Could be that if there is this kind of field, then you would just access the information in this field. Oh, okay, so you can read this. It was downloadable here. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mika. And now we have, I think, 10 minutes for some comments and questions. So I would like to invite Ewelina and Slawomir here at the table to respond to someone's question. If anyone has some comments and questions, I think should come here to speak to the microphone.
Thank you all for such interesting talks. I wanted to direct this one to Ewelina. I found this really fascinating, and as most people probably did, your video quite emotional. My question is regarding the kind of the dynamics and the interaction in terms of maybe following along the lines of the presentation yesterday, when things go off a little bit, or did they go off? There was one woman who was more distressed that was quite in the foreground. And I wondered how generally the convener or facilitator, whatever the performer, I'm not sure the term that you use for her. The leader, yeah. How she, is it going off script to attend to her? And I noticed that she was quite left to her own devices, and is obviously the imparting was between the people in the audience were touching those close, but nobody was really touching her. I think the leader put her hand on her chest at one point. And then I think somebody who was maybe had a t-shirt on, who was part of the event, maybe came around her. I just wonder if they're encouraged to assist or help, or how that kind of goes off a very formulaic event. Yeah.
Actually, the video you saw was a video from Better Church from US. Yeah. The video made by me, but actually I participated in similar events. So, oh, sorry. So I can tell you that the leader is always the person who starts the performance. And actually there are some people who help, team leaders, right? So they always participate in those kinds of events. I noticed that here in Italy and in Poland. And it always happens in the same way, you know, the leader initiates and then it goes like this, you know, one after another. And then people touch each other, you know, they believe that they actually, they evoke some kind of energy, right? And the energy goes from one onto another. That's it. Right. That's the answer actually I can give you, right? You're welcome.
Hello. Thank you all three for very interesting papers, but I'm going to follow on your question to you as well, and just ask you, because what you presented to us, you seem to be speaking about the performative power of language. Yes. Now, that's what you stressed in your presentation. But in your abstract, you made reference to hypnotic techniques, which you haven't mentioned yet. So could you just elaborate, like how you're relating, because it seems to be very different things to me, but how you're relating performative power language as you talk today, and the strategies and the techniques, and an idea of hypnosis, if you could. Actually, yes. Are you going to hold more questions, or?
Actually the topic of my PhD thesis. And this is the main focus, the main part I concentrated on. When it comes to the hypnotic techniques, actually I also described the induction technique, which concentrates on the evoking part. Maybe I didn't pay enough attention in my presentation to this technique because of the lack of time. So I decided to actually focus more on the linguistic part, but they always go together, you know, so the language is something that is embedded, you know, into all those strategies, those techniques, and they actually cooperate, right? Yeah, maybe I should have paid more attention to those hypnotic techniques, but you know, because of the lack of time, I wanted to make it as brief as possible, right? So sorry about that.
I have a question for Slawomir. Actually, a brief comment and a question. The first one is connected to what you say. There's a lack of attention by cognitive studies of religion about the cultural specific context where spiritual healing are produce. And I was wondering if something is changing in cognitive studies of religion. As I saw in the last few years, for example, in Dimitris Tsigalata's ritual, there's something different there. And in Eduard Slingerland's call for reconciliance, there's something moving there. And I would like to know what you are thinking about that. And then even from a cognitive standpoint, you said that cognitive studies of religion, sciences of religion, are not particularly interested in spiritual healing because they are considering religion and spirituality as a sort of byproducts of adaptive problems, issues, etc. And so, but I would like to really understand, as a scholars of religion, in this perspective, is there such a thing as spiritual healing from a cognitive standpoint? I mean, does the term spiritual possess a peculiar meaning which had something to normal or non-spiritual healing? I mean, in which then we could say that spiritual healing is a special kind of healing? Is this a special kind of healing from a cognitive standpoint?
Yeah, the second question, I don't think so. I don't think that it's special. Yeah, I think that it can be subsumed to the category of religious healing just. Yeah, so, cognitive scientists try to explain such healing behavior, mainly in terms of ordinary processes, mainly cognitive processes. So this is a kind of reduction of these phenomena to ordinary cognitive processes. For example, when they reconstruct the structure of a ritual and including healing ritual. And as for the first question about the changes in the cognitive science of religion, and yeah, of course, yeah, there are many approaches that try to connect cognition and culture, yeah, and the emphasis is put on this point, yeah. I mean, cognition and culture, relations between cognition and culture, and Dimitris Tsigalata's is a good example here, yeah. But another approaches are interested in the embodiment, yeah, of religious cognition. It's a very important topic right now. So embodiment, but also extended cognition. So how material tools, material objects are used in cognitive processing, yeah. How then they are used in processing information, yeah. So this embeddedness, embodied cognition, embedded cognition, extended cognition. There are many terms, yeah, and different theoretical approaches, yeah. Some and rooted in philosophical discourse, other more empirical. But this field is expanding, yeah, toward more cultural research, yeah, taking into account culture and environment, not only intra-individual cognitive processes.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Dimitris Tsigalata's Ritual is a book published in English, I think 2018 or 2019. Tsigalata's. It's a Greek surname. It's there's a question online. By whom? I can David Armando. Okay. David, please.
Yes, hello to everybody. I'm sorry not to be there for, well, sanitarian reasons. I was very, I'm moving a little bit in the footstep of, do you hear me? I'm moving on the footstep of the last two questions, and I was very interested in the sort of circularity between spiritual and non-spiritual kinds of healing, and also of explanation. I was surprised by the in the second paper on the fact that Neo-Pentecostals use the cognitive behavioral notions to build their rituals, and then also the question about hypnosis. I found it was very interesting, and I was wondering if we can understand better this sort of circularity if we adopt a more deep historical perspective, because all the phenomena we have been talked about, in my impression, in my studies, are also very much rooted in a 2nd-century Western tradition, which is the tradition of animal magnetism, mesmerism, and hypnosis, which also has a lot to do with psychedelic, with the New Age psychedelic tradition. So I was wondering if this perspective can help us also to see that in Western tradition, in contemporary Western tradition, spiritual healing is not something which is basic, original, and then can be explained also in not religious ways, but it adopts itself a non-religious, non necessarily spiritual tradition in order to build its methods. Thank you.
Any we would like to answer?
Okay, so as I said before, I mean, I didn't pay enough attention to the question of hypnotic induction, but well, I only carried out a research within the spiritual context, so I don't really know how it works outside that context. But I can definitely say that what I saw is really powerful, and those people who claimed to have been distressed, now they claim to be recovered. So it works, to some point, and they are pretty aware of this fact. They are also happy to testify, although I had some problems at the beginning to find the respondents, especially in Italy. It wasn't easy, but I managed to do so. So, I mean, I only focus on the religious context, and I don't really know how it works outside the religious context. So maybe my supervisor will say something about that.
Yeah, I think that the concepts of religion and spirituality are problematic, especially from the cognitive perspective, yeah, because they are questioned, yeah. I mean, spirituality, of course, but by also religion as a category. This criticism of religion as a category, yeah, is vivid, yeah, in recent decades, years, yeah. So, but when, as for spiritual healing, I think that there are different approaches, different ways of understanding, yeah, from the participants' perspective, what spiritual healing really is. Yeah, so we have these approaches that refer to some transcendent powers. Yeah, something that is outside of the individual. Yeah, something that is transcendent in more ontological sense, and these approaches are not necessarily related to religion. They can be, of course, non-religious as well. Then we have approaches that are more anthropological, yeah, based on the conception on the distinction between the spiritual and the psychological, yeah. So spirit and soul. This distinction is also ancient, yeah. because we can find it in many religious traditions, including even Western traditions, including Christianity, but also Western philosophy, Gnosticism, etc. So so this is another approach, and there are also more scientific approaches that try to explain spiritual healing in more scientific terms. Yeah, so I mean, they try to find some underlying mechanisms. Yeah, other than placebo, or to show how placebo really works. Yeah, how the placebo effect really works, if you want to refer to this concept. And it's a kind of a mystery, yeah, because we have some troubles to study these phenomena. Yeah? I mentioned a neuroscientific perspective, but it's very difficult to study individuals in trance, for example, yeah, in ritual. There are, for example, studies with studies on meditation. Yeah, meditation is more stable. It's possible, yeah, to put someone to imagining machinery, but it's much more difficult to study this more dynamic phenomena. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you to three speakers for the fascinating talk. Now we have a brief coffee break, and then we will meet again at 11 o'clock here with a roundtable conducted by Emily Pierini. His Heal Network Workshop with Healing Practitioner, Pathways to Healing Cooperation. Thank you very much. See you soon.